couple of high-profile cases dealing with corruption in state governments in the federal courts up in Chicago. We already saw guilty verdicts in the ComEd 4 trial of a allegation of nearly a decade-long bribery scheme of the utility, giving little-to-do-nothing contracts to associates of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. And in that case, there were a lot of audio recordings and even undercover video recordings that led to the jury in that case giving the guilty verdicts to all four individuals, a former ComEd official and several lobbyists, including a close confidant of Madigan's, Michael McLean. And that case, of course, came to a conclusion in April, and they issued that guilty verdict. Well, there are other cases stemming from that entire incident. One involving Madigan himself, where he faces 22 charges, and McLean also faces additional charges in that case, and that'll be heard next spring. And there's some filings in federal court this week dealing with Madigan's case. But there's also a case against Tim Mapes, who was Madigan's former chief of staff and clerk of the House, and he is charged with lying to investigators and obstructing justice. That goes to trial next month, and filings in that case back and forth about possibly suppressing evidence, and the feds revealing a whole bunch of stuff in that case. So what's the latest? Well, we'll get it for you here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Here's the headline. Feds detail Madigan's criminal enterprise, alleging corporations handed out bribes to cronies. And if you look at this particular case of Madigan and what's going on, you've got the motions continuing going back and forth, and it's of course got House Speaker Michael Madigan's attorneys looking to essentially change the prospect of the case moving forward and what the arguments are. So in the summer of 2020, some background here, federal prosecutors revealed a deferred prosecution agreement between ComEd and the government that had the utility agree to pay a $200 million fine for bribing public official A. It was later revealed that was Madigan. Since then, Madigan's been charged with 22 counts of corruption in the ComEd case and an additional counts in a case involving AT&T and their former president. Earlier this year, four individuals, including Michael McLean, a close confidant of Madigan's, were found guilty in the scheme. Madigan's former chief of staff, Tim Mapes, faces trial next month. Madigan and McLean, they face charges next spring. All have pleaded not guilty. Now, last month, Madigan made a motion to dismiss some of the counts. Monday, his attorneys asked for an amended bill of particulars. They filed that Madigan respectfully request the court grant this motion for leave to permit him to amend his previously filed motion for bill of particulars to seek a bill of particulars that also requires the government to set forth the theory of liability, bribe, or gratuity. It plans on advancing a trial and allege whether the thing of value that he legally received and to spell out what that, quote, thing of value is. So on Tuesday, prosecutors, they urged the courts to ignore that motion. And the filing is a good 100-plus pages. And let's go ahead and check that out. You've got the U.S. versus Mike Madigan, 152 pages, and all of the different overview here, the applicable laws, the ComEd-related counts shall not be dismissed. AT&T-related counts shouldn't be dismissed. Madigan's constitutional rights regarding the allegations he's making from previous U.S. Supreme Court precedent about what is corrupt and what's not. Those are meritless, they say, but they go on to detail in the case. They say defendant Michael Madigan was the leader of a corrupt criminal enterprise, the tentacles of which extended from the office of the Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives in Springfield to the 13th Ward Democratic Organization on the south side of Chicago. For approximately 8 years, through the operation of this criminal enterprise, Madigan exploited his position as a high-ranking public official to manipulate the levers of state and local government for the purpose of illegally enriching himself and his associates. Now, prosecutors, they allege Madigan and McLean arranged for a flood of corrupt payments and perks to be doled out to Madigan and his associates in exchange as a reward for Madigan's abuse of his powers. Major corporations handed out more than $1 million in bribes to Madigan's cronies to secure Madigan's assistance and favor with respect to passage of legislation worth hundreds of millions. to the companies. They also allege that Madigan was sure to line his own pockets by taking official action at the Illinois State House in exchange for legal work being steered to his private law firm. Madigan's pretrial motions and others that have been filed are totally baseless, they say. For the reasons described in greater detail, each and every one of these motions should be denied, and the matter should proceed to trial as scheduled. So that's the latest filings in the Madigan case. In the Mapes case this week, you had the revelation that more recorded phone calls are expected. So Tim Mapes, he has these allegations that he obstructed justice and lied to investigators. And in court filings this week, Mapes moved to exclude some evidence. Prosecutors, they rebutted that and detailed the types of recordings they have in their motion to deny Mapes' motion. They say it's essential that the jury learn about the close relationship between Madigan and confidant Michael McLean and Mapes before and after the 2017 to 2019 timeframe. Their close relationship and consistent communications demonstrates that Mapes could not have forgotten the critical role McLean played in Madigan's political operation when he testified in March of 2021. Mapes served in leadership with Madigan's office for more than 2 decades. He also served as executive director of the Democratic Party of Illinois before resigning both positions amid harassment and bullying allegations in 2018. Among the evidence prosecutors are looking to use in next month's trial are calls between Mapes and McLean about Mapes' resignation, sexual harassment allegations, legislation concerning a parcel in Chinatown, and Mapes divulging a meeting that he had with the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And in that case, again, you've got Timothy Mapes, who is the former House clerk for Mike Madigan. And the federal prosecutors, they lay out what they have against Mapes, and in particular, among the evidence, they're talking about any communication in which McLean tells Mapes about interactions with Madigan is relevant, they say, as they demonstrate that Mapes' repeated testimony that he did not know what McLean did for Madigan from 2017 to 2019 was false. In one call, prosecutors said that McLean later told Mapes that he was a little put out with Madigan for the way he treated Mapes, and that he was thinking of telling Madigan, quote, "I never thought you would be the one to leave the foxhole." The volume of calls, they say, between the two men is also highly probative, I guess, particularly whereas here the defense will be that Mapes had a failure of memory. Here, Mapes had dozens of calls with McLean in the nearly 1 year of the wiretap. In one call, February 19th of 2019, prosecutors tell the court in their filing that at the end of the call, Mapes again said, "I'm just reporting in," again clearly showing that he was intending to keep McLean in the loop so that Madigan, too, could be kept in the loop. Another call from May 30th of 2018, prosecutors said that Mapes asked McLean, "So, any suggestions for tomorrow? For anything? The boss? The family? I don't care." Other recordings, prosecutors want to give the jury involved Madigan, McLean and Madigan's son, and even Madigan using McLean's phone to make phone calls. We'll hear some reaction from a corruption expert, St. Xavier University professor David Parker, coming up next to the revelation. We're going to hear more audio recordings and also the prospect of whether or not we're going to see some true ethics reforms based off of this whole case at the Illinois State House. Is that going to happen? So stay tuned. We'll get to that next here on WMA. Talking about the ongoing corruption trials against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, but also his former chief of staff, Tim Mapes, faces trial next month. And in that case, you've got federal prosecutors saying that they have more phone calls, and they're going to show loyalty for the boss in some recordings in that Madigan-related corruption case against Tim Mapes. And I asked the corruption expert that I regularly go to, David Parker. He is a professor at the University of St. Xavier, and he talks about how, indeed, some progress is being made here when it comes to the ongoing corruption cases, especially after the ComEd 4 trial. Here's David Parker.
Oh, most certainly, and I think it's sending a serious signal, an important signal. I mean, people have gotten, people across the country, not only in Illinois, but people are sick and tired of the corruption and feeling like it's just a broken system and everybody's just getting away with it, ignoring it. So a lot of progress has been made, I think.
Parker says these trials are definitely showing some progress, but to the idea of even more audio recordings being released, you had dozens of video and audio recordings released during the ComEd 4 trial, and now we're expecting even more in the Mapes trial. And Parker says these types of things, they're really powerful and can impact these cases.
Oh, incredibly important. I mean, you can't unring a bell. When somebody hears something, they hear it. And even when a judge gives a jury instruction, how do you forget what you just heard or saw? It's like a picture speaks 1,000 words. And especially when you're hearing that from somebody's own voice. I mean, how you sit there and say, they're going to say, I never said that. We just heard you say it. Or we just heard somebody substantiate it. It's not innuendos anymore, really. So it can be very, very damning. I mean, why do you think there's so much effort that's put into trying to get these things outside of the jury, hearing them and seeing them? So there's a lot of motion practice.
And that motion that Mapes' attorneys made was to exclude some of this evidence. But the federal prosecutor saying, no, this is why this evidence is important, and that's why we're pushing to have Mapes' motion to exclude this evidence denied. So to the issue of ethics reforms, even with the ComEd 4 guilty verdict, even with Mapes' trial next month, even with Madigan's trial next year, we have yet to see substantive ethics reforms filed at the Illinois State House. Now, Parker says, ethics reforms can only go so far, and he says there really needs to be a change in culture.
I know the Illinois House, there's members, I'm not going to pick out a party or anything, that they really are calling for ethics reform. And there's a systemic problem in Illinois. And there's an old saying that culture trumps core values in building ethical organizations. You look back at case studies like WorldCon and Enron. You can have an award-winning code of ethics, code of conduct, and it's going to be completely ignored. So it's the culture of organization. People are going to look around and see what their role models are getting away with. What people who are very, very successful. How they've become successful, what they're going to get away with. A lot of times considered going down the interstate, and the speed limit say is 65. How many people just go 65? I mean, a lot of times people they go with the flow of traffic, and that could be they're within their comfort levels, but a lot of times it's speeding and all. So you see that with organizations. Wells Fargo. So they're going to have to address the cultural factors and personal integrity and look around. And so these types of criminal prosecutions really matter, and somebody starts weighing things out and saying, number one, is it worth the risk? Is a big one. So cost-benefit analysis. But a lot of it's going to be lead by example. When you talk about ethics reform, there needs to be some serious consequences. Even in U.S. Congress, a lot of times there's ethical issues, and the members just have basically the members wag a finger at them. They might get a letter saying, this didn't look good, don't do it again. Somebody's going to say, okay, big deal. And then you do a cost-benefit analysis and saying this could benefit me, my son, daughter get into a university. Some of my friends get lucrative contracts and jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Having a finger waved at you, that's not much. And so we have to look at that, things like that, and say, no, there's a real cost here. And again, if people are looking around and other people are getting away with it, that's not sending a good signal. That's why these trials are so important to send the signal. But they have to hold each other accountable. So, that's going to be the big step forward is holding themselves and others accountable.
And again, David Parker, St. Xavier University, conversation I had with him yesterday about the ongoing corruption trials against former leaders in Illinois state government, and saying that, the trials are important, sometimes even more important than ethics reforms, because then if you see, leaders being charged and being sentenced to prison time, that could weigh whether or not somebody's going to act corruptly. But really, it's about a culture change at the Illinois State House. So we'll continue to watch all the happenings and filings that happen in those cases, with Madigan facing trial next year and Tim Mapes facing trial next month. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's news and